There's a truth about avoidance that few ever see. You look at them and think they're cold, distant, or detached. But if you could hear the conversations they have when the lights are off, when the pressure is gone, when the armor falls even for a second, you'd realize they're not running from you. They're running from a part of themselves that still believes love is dangerous. Because deep inside, every avoidant is a soul that craves connection just as much as you do. They want to be seen, to be felt, to be chosen. But the moment they feel that closeness, something ancient inside them whispers, if you let them too close, you'll lose yourself again. That voice was born in pain. It was born the first time they gave their heart to someone who didn't know how to hold it. So now, their protection looks like distance. Their defense looks like silence. And here's what they'll never tell you. They tell their best friend that they miss you. They admit that sometimes they stare at your last message and wonder if they should reach out. They confess that they want to love without fear but don't know how. But they can't say that to you because you matter too much. You're too close. You have the power to wound them in ways a friend never could. So they open their soul in safe spaces while guarding it from the one person who could heal it. It's not rejection, it's survival. When love feels like a battlefield, the safest place to hide is behind distance. They learn to equate closeness with pain, affection with suffocation, commitment with loss of freedom. So when you reach out with love, their mind says, "What's the catch?" And that's why they pull away. Not because they don't want love, but because they've never known how to receive it without losing control. But here's the divine paradox. Every avoidant secretly prays for someone strong enough not to chase them. They want to be chosen without being cornered, loved without being demanded. They need a love that whispers, not a love that shouts. A love that says, "I'm not here to trap you. I'm here to see you." Because what they're really longing for isn't freedom from you. It's freedom from fear. And fear loses its power the moment love stops demanding and starts understanding. You can't force an avoidant to open up. You can only become a space safe enough for them to exhale. They hide their pain because they believe it's too much. They hide their truth because they think it will drive you away. But here's what you need to know. Their silence is not absence, it's protection. When they disappear, it's not because they stopped caring. It's because the weight of feeling so much terrifies them. So what do? You stop trying to pull them out of hiding with pressure or panic. You love them from presence, not pursuit. You let your calm become their signal that love doesn't have to be chaos. And when you do that, something begins to shift. Their nervous system learns to breathe. Their heart starts to remember that connection doesn't mean collapse. And here's the miracle. When they finally return, when they finally open, it won't be because you chased them. It will be because your love reminded them that it's safe to stay. This is the spiritual lesson behind every avoidant dynamic. Love cannot penetrate through force. It only flows through faith. The more you try to control it, the more it slips through your hands. But when you stand in your truth, when you embody peace, you become the invitation they've been waiting for their whole life. So if you love an avoidant, don't see their distance as rejection. See it as a cry for safety. Don't fight their silence. Honor their fear. Because when you can love someone where they are, not where you wish they'd be, that's when transformation begins. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be the first person who teaches them that love doesn't have to hurt, that being seen doesn't mean losing yourself, that true intimacy isn't about control, it's out freedom. Because love, at its highest level, isn't about getting what you want. It's about becoming what love needs. And sometimes love needs patience. Sometimes love needs stillness. And sometimes love needs the courage to stay open, even when someone else is still learning how. That's not weakness. That's divine strength. That's the kind of love that heals generations. They fear intimacy as much as they crave it. That's the paradox that lives inside every avoidant heart. A silent war between wanting love and feeling terrified by it. They want to be held, but the moment someone reaches out to touch their soul, their instincts scream for escape. It's not that they don't want connection. It's that connection feels like walking into a fire they once got burned by. Somewhere in their past, closeness became dangerous. Maybe love was conditional. Maybe every time they opened up, it led to disappointment, criticism, or abandonment. So now their nervous system equates intimacy with pain. And even when they meet someone kind, someone patient, someone safe, their body doesn't know how to believe it. At first, they can seem calm, composed, and independent. They'll tell you they're fine, on their own, that they don't need much, that they value space. And on the surface, it's true. They've trained themselves to survive alone. But beneath that surface, there's a quiet ache. They watch people who can lean into love, who can surrender to connection, and part of them wishes they could too. But then the old fear rises. If I let someone close, I'll lose myself. If I depend on them, they'll control me. If I love too deeply, I'll get hurt again. This fear is not logical, it's emotional memory. It lives in the body, not the mind, so they crave what they fear. They want love, but only if it feels safe enough not to dissolve them. They want someone to reach for them, but not so much that it feels like pressure. They want to be chosen, but they don't want to be consumed. That's why their relationships often swing between connection and distance, closeness and withdrawal. When things start to feel too intense, too real, they unconsciously back away. They tell themselves they just need space, that something feels off, that they're better alone. But what they really need is emotional safety, the kind that doesn't demand, doesn't overwhelm, doesn't threaten to take away their freedom. You see, the avoidant is not cold. They're cautious. They've seen what happens when love becomes chaos, and they swore never to lose themselves like that again. So they build walls, not because they hate love, but because they don't trust it yet. And every wall they build is really a prayer for safety. Show me that I can be loved without being controlled. Show me that closeness doesn't have to mean pain. Deep down, they yearn to be met by someone strong enough to hold space for both their fear and their longing. Someone who doesn't take their distance personally, who doesn't try to fix them, who understands that their retreat is not rejection, it's a reflex. When love approaches too fast, their instinct is to run. But if love stands still, patient and grounded, they slowly begin to turn back toward it. Because what they truly crave is not intensity, it's safety. They want to feel that they can stay close without disappearing. There's something sacred in that struggle. It teaches us that intimacy isn't about forcing connection. It's about creating space for trust to grow. When an avoidant begins to feel seen without being chased, when they sense they can have both love and freedom, something miraculous happens. The walls begin to soften, the fear begins to fade, and for the first time, they allow themselves to believe that love doesn't have to hurt, that they can be fully known and still remain whole. This is the quiet truth behind their distance. Their fear is not a lack of love. It's the scar tissue of old pain. Beneath every guarded heart is someone who NCE cared too much and paid the price. But even through all that fear, their craving for connection never dies. It just waits for love to feel safe enough to come home. They confuse love with loss of control. To them, the moment someone gets too close, it feels like their freedom is being taken away. It's not that they don't want love. They do. They dream of it. They fantasize about connection, about being understood and seen. But when it starts to actually happen, something inside them tightens. The closer love comes, the louder the voice of fear becomes. Because for the avoidant, love has always been tied to control, to expectations, to the slow erosion of their individuality. They've learned through experience that affection can turn into obligation, that being needed can turn into being trapped. So when they sense someone leaning in emotionally, their mind doesn't translate it as love. It translates it as danger. They crave connection, but they crave autonomy more. Autono. Mai is their air, their oxygen, the thing that keeps them grounded. So even when they care deeply, they pull back the moment they feel they're being absorbed into someone else's emotions. To them, dependence feels like suffocation. They've spent years teaching themselves to stand on their own 2 feet, to need nothing from anyone, to never give another person the power to destabilize them. It's not pride, it's self-protection. When they confuse love with control, it's because at some point, love did control them. It dictated how they should feel, who they should be, what they should give up to keep the peace. That's the root of their fear, the belief that love is something that takes from you, that it demands more than it gives, that in order to keep it, you have to trade pieces of yourself until one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize who you've become. So they run from that feeling. They fight for distance, not because they hate you, but because they're fighting for themselves. Every time someone says, I love you, they hear, and now I own a part of you. And their soul rebels against it. It's a tragic misunderstanding, because real love doesn't take your freedom, it expands it. But they don't know that yet. To them, love is a storm that once wrecked their home, so now even gentle rain feels threatening. That's why they often appear detached or unemotional. It's their way of keeping control over the narrative. If they can control their feelings, they can't be controlled by yours. If they can minimize their needs, they can't be disappointed when someone doesn't meet them. It's all a form of self-preservation disguised as indifference. Yet deep down, they don't want to live like that. They long for a love that doesn't ask them to shrink. They want to be close to someone who understands that connection doesn't mean possession. They want to give their heart without fearing that it will be used to cage them. But until they experience that kind of love, their instinct will always be to protect their independence, even at the cost of intimacy. They would rather feel lonely on their own terms than trapped under someone else's version of love. This internal conflict creates a push and pull that confuses the people who love them. One day they're open and warm, the next they're distant and cold. They can say all the right words, make you feel like you matter, and then suddenly retreat, leaving you wondering what changed. But what changed was their sense of control. The moment they feel they're losing grip on their emotional autonomy, their fear takes over. They pull back to reestablish their boundaries, to remind themselves that they're still in charge of their heart. The truth is, love and control can't coexist. Control is rooted in fear, love is rooted in trust, and the avoidant has spent most of their life trusting no one but themselves. That's why their journey is not just about learning to love another person, it's about learning to surrender. Not surrender as in giving up who they are, but surrender as in letting love in without letting fear dictate the rules. When they finally discover that real love doesn't confine but liberates, they begin to relax into connection. They start to see that love doesn't want to change them, it wants to meet them. And that's when everything shifts. The walls don't come down all at once, but piece by piece, the fear starts to lose its grip. They begin to realize that being loved doesn't mean being controlled. It means being seen and accepted exactly as they are. And that realization becomes the doorway to the kind of love they always wanted but never believed was possible. They open up where there's no emotional risk. That's the quiet truth about many avoidants. They can share their deepest thoughts, their frustrations, even their fears, but only in spaces where their heart isn't on the line. They'll talk to a best friend, a colleague, even a stranger on a plane about things they'd never say to the person they love. It's not that they're deceitful or hiding on purpose. It's that vulnerability feels safer when the outcome doesn't threaten their sense of security, when the person they're confiding in doesn't have the power to leave, reject, or emotionally dismantle them. Honesty flows easily. But when it's someone who truly matters, someone whose opinion or love could shake their foundation, that's when they shut down. It's one of the most misunderstood patterns in relationships with avoidance. You might see them laughing freely with friends, sharing stories that you didn't even know existed, and wonder, why can't they talk to me like that? The truth is, they want to, but love raises the stakes. When you love someone deeply, your words carry weight. Vulnerability in that space doesn't feel like conversation. It feels like exposure. It feels like standing naked in front of judgment. And for the avoidant, that's unbearable. Because if they reveal the messy parts, their fears, insecurities, or emotional wounds, and you turn away, it will confirm their deepest belief that love is not safe. So they keep their emotional truths in safer containers. They'll tell a friend, I miss them, but I don't know how to go back. They'll admit and get scared when things get too real. But to you, the one they love, they might only offer silence or surface talk. Not because they don't feel, but because they feel too much. With a friend, they can express without consequences. With you, the risk is losing the very connection that matters most. This is why many people misunderstand avoidance as cold or uncaring. In reality, they are often some of the most introspective and emotionally aware individuals. They just keep that awareness tucked away, only sharing it in places that don't feel threatening. Love to them is not a playground. It's a battlefield where every word could trigger a landmine of rejection or shame. And when they sense that vulnerability company, you'll change how you see them. They retreat into emotional safety. They don't realize that withholding those truths only widens the distance. What begins as protection slowly becomes isolation. They think they're keeping themselves safe, but in doing so, they starve the relationship of oxygen. Real connection requires truth, the raw, unfiltered kind. And when they can't share with the person they love, they end up feeling unseen, misunderstood, and disconnected, even in relationships that once felt full of promise. The paradox is that they're often more authentic with the people they don't depend on. That authenticity feels effortless because it carries no emotional cost. But with you, their heart is on the table. One wrong move, one look of disappointment, one sigh of frustration, and their body interprets it as danger. So they armor up with distance, silence, or indifference. But underneath that armor, they're aching to be understood. They're silently praying for someone to see. At their withdrawal isn't rejection, it's protection. The healing begins when they finally experience love that doesn't punish honesty. When they realize that sharing their fears doesn't lead to abandonment, but deeper connection. When they open up and see that they're still accepted, still loved. That's when their nervous system starts to relax. That's when the walls begin to lower. Because the only thing stronger than fear is consistent, unconditional presence. For the avoidant, emotional intimacy is a foreign land. They watch others navigate it effortlessly and wonder why it feels so treacherous for them. But over time, with enough patience, safety, and love that asks for nothing in return, they start to understand that the people who matter most are not there to take from them, they're there to meet them. And when that understanding finally takes root, they discover a new truth. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the bridge that transforms solitude into connection and fear into freedom. They long to be chosen without being chased. This is one of the deepest emotional truths buried inside the heart of an avoidant. They don't want someone to beg for their love or chase them down to prove their devotion. They want to be chosen from a place of peace, not desperation. Something inside them softens. They start to feel that maybe this connection isn't trying to own them, but to understand them. Maybe this person isn't here to demand something, but to offer presence. And presence, not pursuit, is what brings them back. They long to be seen in their complexity, not as someone who needs fixing or saving, but as someone who's learning to trust again. They want love that honors their timing, not love that tries to rush their process. Because for the avoidant, rushing feels like losing control. They need space to breathe, to sort through their emotions, to test whether what they're feeling is safe. And when someone respects that, it builds trust. It tells them, say, you don't have to hide from me. I'm not going anywhere. That message is more powerful than any grand romantic gesture. The avoidant may act indifferent, but they are deeply observant. They notice how you respond to their distance. They pay attention to whether your love remains grounded or turn into panic. If you start chasing, they interpret it as confirmation that love will trap them again. But if you remain calm, if you stay centered in your own strength, they begin to feel something they rarely feel, emotional safety. That's when the walls begin to lower. That's when they start coming closer, not because they're being pulled, but because they're choosing to. Being chosen for them means being loved for who they are, not for who you want them to become. It means someone looks at their silence, their hesitation, their distance, and says, I see you, and I still choose you. That kind of love disarms them. It's not loud, not demanding, not full of ultimatums. Unassuming, it's empowering. It teaches the avoidant that intimacy doesn't have to mean losing independence. It shows them that love can coexist with freedom. And that's the moment transformation begins. When love shifts from something that threatens to something that nourishes. They want to be chosen by someone who understands that real connection isn't about constant closeness. It's about emotional security. Someone who doesn't take their pauses personally, who can hold steady even in silence. Because when love feels patient, the avoidant begins to trust that it's real. When it doesn't demand, it becomes irresistible. When it doesn't chase, it invites. So they test not to play games, but to see if love will hold steady when they pull back. And when it does, when love stays calm instead of collapsing into anxiety, they feel something sacred safety. That's when they start showing up more, speaking more, trusting more, not because they're being forced to, but because they finally belie. Eve they can. That's all they ever wanted, to be chosen, not chased, to be loved in a way that feels like freedom, not capture, to experience connection that doesn't demand surrender, but invites authenticity. When love reaches that level, it becomes something higher than romance. It becomes healing. And for the avoidant, that's the kind of love that finally feels like home. They believe vulnerability equals weakness. For most avoidants, this belief isn't born from pride, it's born from pain. Somewhere along the way, they learned that opening up meant getting hurt. Maybe they were once vulnerable and were met with judgment instead of compassion. Maybe their emotions were dismissed, mocked, or used against them. Over time, they made a silent vow, never again. They decided that strength meant self-containment, that control was safety, and that showing emotion was a risk they couldn't afford. So they built a life where feelings were managed privately, if at all. They carry themselves with composure, with a quiet kind of resilience that looks powerful on the outside, but inside, it's a shield, one that keeps love out as much as it keeps pain away. To them, vulnerability feels like walking into battle without armor. It's the moment where all the defenses drop and anything can happen, and because they've known what it feels like to be let down, they associate openness with danger. So instead of sharing what they feel, they suppress it. Instead of reaching out, they retreat. When they're hurt, they go silent. When they're confused, they act indifferent. Not because they don't care, but because caring out loud feels unsafe. They often admire vulnerability in others. They may even be drawn to partners who express emotion freely, who wear their hearts on their sleeves. But when it comes to their own feelings, that admiration turns to fear. They'll listen with empathy, even offer advice, but when the focus turns inward, when it's their turn to open up, the words get stuck in their throat. Their mind tells them, if I reveal too much, I'll lose control. If I show my pain, I'll look weak. If I depend on someone, they'll use it against me. It's not ego, it's survival. Their independence is their protection. But the cost of that protection is isolation, because vulnerability is the gateway to intimacy, and without it, love stays on the surface. The avoidant might have relationships that look stable but feel distant. They might be surrounded by people who love them but still feel alone. That's the paradox. The very thing they fear, vulnerability, is the one thing that could bring them the closeness they crave. Yet every time they feel that pull to open up, fear whispers, don't do it, you'll regret it. Their fear of vulnerability isn't just about others. It's about themselves. It's about facing their own emotions without the shield of logic or control. True vulnerability means feeling everything they've tried to avoid: the loneliness, the grief, the longing, the unmet needs. And that's terrifying. So they stay busy, keep conversations light, intellectualize their feelings, or retreat into solitude. Anything to avoid the rawness of being seen, because to be seen in their mind means to be exposed, and exposure once led to pain. Yet beneath all that fear is a quiet longing. They want to trust. They want to let someone in. They want to share their inner world without being misunderstood. And sometimes, in rare moments when they feel truly safe, they let their guard down, just a little. They might share a story from the past, a regret, a soft truth, and afterward they'll often pull back, testing if that openness will be used against them. If it's met with gentleness, something inside them begins to heal. It's in those moments that they start to realize vulnerability doesn't have to mean weakness. It can mean courage. It can mean strength. Real healing for an avoidant begins when they meet someone who doesn't punish their openness. Receives it with tenderness and respect. When they see that vulnerability doesn't lead to rejection but to deeper connection, they start to rewire their belief system. They begin to see that true strength isn't in suppressing emotions but in owning them. It's in having the courage to be seen, even when it feels uncomfortable. Over time, they learn that vulnerability isn't a loss of control. It's an expansion of it. Because when they stop running from their feelings, they stop being ruled by them. They begin to live authentically, not defensively. And that's when love can finally reach them. That's when relationships stop feeling like battles for power and start feeling like spaces for peace. Vulnerability becomes the bridge, not the threat. And what once felt like weakness transforms into the purest form of strength, the ability to love and be loved without fear. They hide their pain because they think it'll drive you away. Deep down, avoidants carry a quiet belief that they're emote. Ions are too heavy, too complicated, too much for anyone to handle. Somewhere in their story, they learned that expressing pain led to rejection, criticism, or shame. So now, instead of showing it, they conceal it. They mask sadness with indifference, disguise fear as composure, and bury loneliness under independence. They believe that if they reveal what's really happening inside, the people they love will either pull away or see them as weak. And that belief, no matter how false, governs almost every emotional choice they make. To them, pain is private. It's not meant to be shared or soothed by others. It's something they deal with in silence, behind closed doors, when no one is watching. They've built a life around emotional self-reliance because it feels safer than risking vulnerability. So even when they're breaking inside, they'll smile and say, I'm fine. They'll disappear for a few days, pretending they just needed space, when in reality, they're trying to regulate the storm within without letting anyone see the chaos. The irony is that their silence often creates the very distance they fear. They hide their pain to avoid being abandoned, but their emotional withdrawal can make others feel shut out, unloved, or unimportant. They want connection, but fear that honesty will destroy it. So they protect love by withholding truth. They think they're sparing you from their darkness, not realizing that real love isn't scared of the dark. It's strengthened by it. But they don't know that yet. In their world, love has always felt conditional. It has always come with a price: be easy to love or be left behind. When they hurt, they pull back, not to punish, but to preserve. They retreat to recalibrate, to collect themselves before re-emerging. It's their way of staying in control of something that once felt uncontrollable. Showing pain feels like giving up power, and giving up power feels like danger. Because if they let someone see their raw emotions, what if that person leaves? What if they're judged, misunderstood, or pitied? The idea of being seen in weakness is unbearable because in their past, weakness was never safe. It was exploited or ignored. So now they choose silence over sincerity, distance over disclosure. But the truth is, hiding pain doesn't make it disappear. It just buries it deeper, where it festers and shapes their behavior in ways they don't even realize. Their guardedness, their need for control, their emotional detachment, all of it traces back to this fear of being too much. They yearn for someone who can see beyond their silence, who won't take their withdrawal personally, who can recognize the ache behind their calm eyes and say, "And know you're hurting. You don't have to hide from me." Those words spoken with gentleness and certainty are medicine for an avoidant heart. When they finally meet love that doesn't run from pain, something profound begins to shift. They start to see that their emotions are not liability. Yes, but signals, invitations to connect, to be understood, to heal. They begin to realize that real intimacy isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about someone choosing to stay even when you're not easy to love. That realization is terrifying at first, but slowly it dismantles the old belief that pain must be hidden to be accepted. They begin to test this new truth in small ways, revealing a piece of their sadness, a fragment of their fear. And when that vulnerability is met with compassion instead of criticism, the healing deepens. They learn that love doesn't crumble under the weight of truth. It grows stronger. They start to trust that they don't have to wear strength like armor because genuine love doesn't require them to be unbreakable. It simply asks them to be real. Eventually, they begin to understand that sharing pain is not a burden, it's a bridge. Every time they open up, they invite connection instead of pushing it away. They realize that the right people won't run from their darkness. They'll walk through it with them. And that's the moment the fear begins to lose power. The silence softens, the walls lower. And for the first time, they experience love not as something fragile that must be protected, but as something powerful enough to hold even their heaviest truths. At the end of the day, what we're really talking about here isn't avoidance, it's protection. These are people who once loved so deeply that it broke them. People who learned, often too young, that love could wound as easily as it could heal. So they built walls, not because they wanted to keep others out, but because they didn't know another way to stay safe. Yet, the truth is, the very walls they built to protect themselves have also kept them from the one thing they crave most: connection. Real soul-level connection that sees beyond the mask, beyond the silence, beyond the fear. When you understand this, your perspective changes. You stop taking their distance personally. You stop chasing their silence with panic. And you begin to love them differently, with patience, with empathy, with presence. You begin to see that behind every avoidant reaction is an old wound saying, "Please don't hurt me again." And when you meet that wound with compassion instead of criticism, everything begins to shift. Healing begins, trust begins, love begins, real love, not the performance of it. This journey isn't just about helping an avoidant open up, it's also about awakening something inside you, a deeper wisdom, a greater emotional intelligence, a love that is mature enough to understand that people don't need to be fixed, they need to feel safe. When you love with that kind of strength, that kind of purity, you become the mirror that shows them what's possible. You become the proof that not every connection ends in pain. And maybe, just maybe, that's what your purpose in their story truly is, not to change them, but to remind them that love doesn't have to hurt. That intimacy can be sacred, not scary. That vulnerability can be power, not weakness. And that healing isn't found in perfection, but in presence. Two imperfect souls willing to stay, to see, and to grow together through the fire. Thank you for listening. Thank you for choosing growth over blame, compassion over control, love over fear. Because every time you choose understanding, you help break a generational pattern of emotional disconnection. You help heal something ancient, not just in them, but in you. And that's how we transform relationships. That's how we transform love. And ultimately, that's how we transform the world.